Why do price guides keep failing buyers, and what can we do to fix them? I'm Tim Graham, and the Property Playbook starts now. Today, I'm joined by the Interim CEO of the Real Estate Institute of Victoria, the peak body leading efforts to rebuild trust and transparency in property pricing. Despite legislation changing in 2017, underquoting remains a major concern for buyers and a source of frustration across the industry. Now, the REIV has launched a strategic working group to develop a blueprint for price guides, aiming to improve transparency, protect vendor interests, and restore confidence in the market. Let's unpack what's really happening behind the scenes and how this new approach could change the way price guides are handled here in Victoria. Jacob Caine, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm really well, Tim. Thanks heaps for having me on.
That's a pleasure. Let's start at the top. Why do you think underquoting remains such a hot issue in the eyes of the public, even after the 2017 reforms?
Look, the short answer is simply that it continues to happen. And as long as underquoting does continue to happen out there, amongst the buying public, we're going to see continued frustration, anger and disappointment, and I suppose distrust in the auction system as a whole will continue to remain sort of stubbornly high. So as long as that practice is out there, we've got problems that we need to overcome and to work towards a system that's more transparent and fairer for everyone involved in it.
How big do you think this problem is? Obviously, I think like 30% of the complaints are actually coming from the industry themselves. What does that sort of say about the concerns within the industry?
Yeah, look, that's a message that we repeat over and over, basically at every opportunity. And one of the driving reasons that we like to repeat that message is to communicate out to the general public and the buying public in particular that this is a practice, that underquoting is something that we despise, that we abhor as a sector. The reason you're seeing agents report is, there's myriad reasons really. One of the driving reasons is that they actually know what underquoting is. That comes from a deep understanding of what the legislative requirements are, what the practices that are required to be compliant with the regulations that govern underquoting. And also it stems from a frustration around what the results of underquoting are on the market, which are effectively a distortion of the market, a confusion amongst everyone involved really. It's not just the buying public, it confuses other potential sellers, it confuses other colleagues and real estate professionals within the sector and gives an unrealistic impression of where the value of properties are sitting at any given moment. So it's a practice that the industry wants very much stamped out, and we do want to see from bodies like Consumer Affairs more action taken on those people, those practitioners out there that are systematically and egregiously exploiting those rules. We've seen the underquoting task force come into effect over the past sort of 12, 18 months. And whilst they've been out on the streets looking to identify instances of breaches there, overwhelmingly we've seen the only response be fines, right? And there haven't been that many fines. You know, to your earlier question, right, how widespread is this? In any given year, Victoria will see between 30,000 and 40,000 auctions conducted. And in the last 12 months, there's been somewhere in the vicinity of 90 to 100 fines issued. Which,
I mean, that's just in the, you're saying 30,000 auctions, there's a lot more transactions than that as well, so it's such a small amount of complaints. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. In the broader scheme of things, in the auction market, it's absolutely minuscule. And in the entire sales market, it's fractions of a percent there. And that's a good point that you make there too around the auction is actually not the majority method of sale. Overwhelmingly, properties here in Victoria and across the Australian eastern seaboard are sold by private treaty or private sale. It's about 80-20, so 20% being the auction numbers too. So when we think about the scale of the problem, it isn't as endemic or widespread as people would think. Part of the reason that there is a perception that it's really widespread too is a misunderstanding about what underquoting is.
Well, I was going to ask, is there a definition behind underquoting? Because just because something's sold above the quoted price doesn't necessarily mean it was underquoted. I mean, we often talk, the population in Australia has grown by 4 million people in the last 10 years, but we've got less houses for sale than we did over the same period. So, you know, when you've got more people trying to fight over the same amount of properties, it's going to go higher than the listed price at times.
That's absolutely right, and that's the crisis that we're facing right now. It's not just a housing affordability crisis. That's the product of a lack of housing. Yeah. And as you say, what does that do? All it does is drive competition. We're going to see results that sit well and truly above those initial quote ranges, those price ranges, and reserve prices as well, just purely and simply based on those market dynamics of supply and demand. And that too is one of those contributing factors out there for the buying public in terms of feeling that underquoting is a massive problem for the sector and is a really frustrating and poor practice. Is sitting behind that is disappointment when they miss out on properties. When properties do sell that have been absolutely quoted appropriately based on evidence, based on genuine comparable prices, the reserve prices sat within that 10% quote range as advertised, but the property sells for 50, 100, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars more than that. That can't help but be disappointing to someone that thought that they were in with a chance on that property.
It could get mixed up with the thought of it being underquoted. But with that said, obviously the REIV has set up a task force to sort of look at this, so you obviously are aware that there is some underquoting out there. What exactly is this strategic group set up to do?
Look, what we've done is put together a really diverse and I think sophisticated group of experts from across the entire real estate landscape. Everyone that touches the real estate transaction. And we've assembled them in the hope of trying to resolve some of the ongoing issues around price quoting explicitly. Now, whilst the regulations, as you noted at the outset of our conversation, you know, they changed in 2017, they've become much better at stamping out those kind of illicit or illegal practices around price quoting. There are still enough avenues, or there's enough murkiness in the regulations to exploit that system and to allow people to get away with underquoting and underquoting in, as I said before, a sort of egregious and systematic fashion. So as long as the buying public are experiencing this out there, as long as there are those loopholes in the regulations, this practice will continue and it will continue to frustrate. So the intent of that working group is to consider all of the options available, try and identify where there could be improvements or tweaks to the existing regulations, and put forward a proposal to the government that is practical, that is fair, that is transparent, and provides a more equitable auction system, a more trusted auction system for all Victorians and hopefully over time for all Australians.
Yeah, I was about to say, because I would think that Victoria is sort of leading the way with this. It's there's so many other states that they put up a for sale sign and there's no price guide and no one's got any idea what it could sell for. So it's almost like it's almost disadvantaged for a lot of buyers going in and saying, well, here's the price guide and it's sold there, and they feel more ripped off than they would if there was no price guide at all.
Yeah, it's a really interesting observation. So in Queensland, for instance, they can't put a price on the property. And for the buying public here in Victoria, how does that work?
Yeah, that's right.
We talk about the democratisation of data, right? Which has happened, has been happening for a long time, and continues to happen. People today, whether you're a buyer, a seller, or a real estate agent, have access to the most information about properties, about sales results that they've ever had, and that gives them the opportunity to, do their own research, an often used phrase at this time. So in the Queensland context, that's effectively what the buying public is doing, is trying to determine, based on the information available to them, where the value of a property sits. To your earlier point, having a price guide can exacerbate that sense of disappointment or frustration. I don't see a world in which that gets repealed or pared back here in Victoria. I think I use the term the genie's out of the bottle in that regard. We've gone down this path, and it's probably I don't see an appetite amongst the buying public to go back to that that context in which the onus is on them to do the research. That said, I still think there are initiatives that can be taken and policies that can be adopted that further educate the buyers. So things like a statement of information, which is a requirement now on any sales listing in Victoria, would effectively become redundant, right?
Yeah,
because the quality of information that everyone has access to is sufficient to inform them about when it comes to auction day, yeah, I'm in with a shot. Like, my budget sits here, the value of this property probably sits there. That doesn't, preclude those instances where someone else is assigned a much higher value, but I can see a world in which things like a statement of information become redundant.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so let's speak specifically about the 2017 legislation. You're not trying to reinvent that, but there's some changes that are likely to be put forward. Could you share with us some of those changes or some of the recommendations you might be thinking of?
Yeah, well, we're considering a really wide array of potential tweaks to the policies or changes to the regulations more broadly. We've spoken about the statement of information. That is one of those areas that's of the regs that is particularly exploitable. For instance, in the event that you can't find as they're defined under the Act, comparable properties, and you don't need to put down comparable properties. Now, we think that is too easily exploited, for instance.
That's right.
So why not, if you've got, and there's a requirement for 3 comparable properties, if you've got one that genuinely sort of demonstrates where the value of the property that you're intending on selling sits, why not have that in there?
Yeah,
and
the other two might actually make it worse.
Exactly, they can muddy the waters in terms of being an accurate reflection of the kind of amenity, location and quality of the home that's being.
Is there, when you think about a valuer's job to put comparables in there and they're putting through, this is, an actual comparable, this one is superior, this one's inferior, is there an element of that could be involved in the comps?
Yeah, look, I think with that's certainly a strategy that sales professionals use with their clients, right? Because they want to give the spectrum and say, like, on a great day, this is where your property might sit, and this is probably where it's sitting. Worst case scenario, we're looking at something like that, and that could work for the buying public too. Again, I think they've been conditioned to expect that what they see is almost a like for like, a direct comparable. But in order to get to that too, what we actually need to do is require additional, more specific and explicit details about the properties right now, because there's no requirements, for instance, for the bedrooms, bathrooms and car parks to line up. Now, there needs to be flexibility to get a like for like and a genuine comparable property, but getting some extra detail into those statement of informations is another means of making it harder for those that are really trying to game the system, and by that I mean real estate agents that are trying to game the system. Make that harder for them to do that, right? Again, something that might support that or complement that is the mandatory disclosure of all sales results within 24 hours of the sale. Right now, owners or estate agents can not disclose the sale price, right? There could be a variety of different reasons for that. It's often, it's a piece of privacy. But if we were to move to an environment in which that was required, we would have way more properties live that could inform where the current market is sitting. Right now, often you have to wait 90 days or beyond.
For the value of general,
precisely, to get that VG data. If we could have that information right now, then you've got that more sort of dynamic live capacity to get an indication of where the property's value, sitting in the current marketplace as well. So beyond that, look, there's the requirement for the 10% range right now. Now, there are corners of the sector that say at the outset of the campaign, that's too narrow. It's too narrow. We need a broader range in which we can refine down into something more finite, that's more informed. So hypothetically, at the outset of a campaign, you might have a 15 or a 20% range, right? Whereby you're gathering research, you're gathering that market data and that market feedback, And then as you progress through the campaign, it would be a requirement to reduce that down. There's an expectation out there amongst the buying public, even though this isn't legislated, that the reserve does sit within the 10% range. Now, overwhelmingly, that's what real estate professionals are trying to do.
Yeah,
Sales
right.
agents are trying to do is to make sure
that
that it's in there, right? But that isn't always the case. So conversations might be had around whether or not it's mandated that the reserve actually sits within that range come, the final week of the campaign. Additional information, like a lot of this is about data, is about transparency, is about giving people, the buying public, the information that they need to make an informed decision come auction day. So other concepts that have been added, for instance, having the Section 32, the contract of sale effectively ready to go at the commencement of the campaign, right? So you've got all of that information. Mandatory building and pest inspections completed, undertaken at the point of advertising as well. So every buyer doesn't have to invest in that in every property, and that the cost of that could be put to the successful buyer at that settlement on the property.
That's a good idea too.
Yeah.
Well, I could ask you another 100 questions about this, but they are giving us the wrap up. Jacob Caine, as a fellow REIV member, thank you very much for your service, and we look forward to seeing what's next.
Thanks for having me on, Tim.
That's the play for today, folks. This program's been brought to you by hotspotting.com.au. This is Ticker. We'll be right back.